Welcome to CIO Dimensions Innovation Talk, a series of conversations with India's eminent business technology leaders on technology, innovation, and a whole host of topics. My name is Radhika Nallayam, and I'm the managing editor for CIO Dimension. I'm excited to welcome my guest for the day, Mr. Mani Mulki, Operating Director for Technology at Kedaara Capital, one of the top private equity firms based in Mumbai. Mr. Mani is a transformational technology leader. In his illustrious career spanning 3.5 decades, he has served in key leadership positions for many iconic brands, such as the Tata, ICICI, Godrej, Pidilite, and the UAE-based multinational group IFCO. Prior to joining Kedaara in March 2021, Mr. Mani held the role of the CIO at Tata Capital, where he was responsible for driving the IT function across all lines of businesses. At IFCO UAE, the makers of acclaimed brands like Tiffany, among many other mass market products that we are familiar with, he led the IT function across the group spanning 10 countries. At ICICI, he held a very strategic role of business technology head for retail banking and digital channels for over 2 years. And he was responsible for all aspects of strategic IT planning, implementation, and support as an integral part of business plan at Pidilite. And of course, at Godrej, where he worked for over 22 years, Mr. Mani had a noteworthy stint marked with several career milestones in both technology and business domains. While moving out of Godrej in 2010, he last served as the EVP of Corporate Information Systems of the company. Mr. Mani, welcome. It's so nice to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Radhika, for the nice welcome and a warm introduction.
Great. So, let's start off by talking a bit more about your present role, Mr. Mani. You come with solid 3 decades of experience leading technology and transformational initiatives for many leading brands. And I think your current role at Kedaara is something relatively new. So let's talk a bit about that. Tell us about the nuances of the current role at Kedaara and how did your years of experience as a technology leader guide your approach here?
Well, I think, the first and foremost is having spent 22 years as a CIO in various organizations. I thought the role at Kedaara is a very natural progression. I can and I'm able to bring all my experience of leading IT departments in various organizations, both financial services and manufacturing, and help the portfolio companies to set their technology roadmap. This role is very different from what I was doing earlier, and it requires a big mindset change. As a CIO, for example, in whether it's in ICICI Bank or whether it's IFCO or whether it's Kedaara Capital, I had a large team in front of me, and it was a fairly powerful position, a fairly influencing position in terms of from an organization perspective. But in a PE firm, as an operating director for technology, I am more of an individual contributor. So there are no large teams with me, so I have to work indirectly with the IT departments of various portfolio companies. So my role is very clearly defined, is to advise the portfolio companies of Kedaara Capital into setting their technology roadmap, hire the right talent, and help them to implement, choose the right partner, and make sure that depending upon the industries, and we have diversified set of portfolio companies, right from healthcare to financial services to manufacturing to pharmaceuticals to consumer tech, and technology initiatives are very different in each of these organizations. The propensity to spend also is very different. So it takes a lot of time to engage with the stakeholders of each of the portfolio companies, convince them to invest in a technology roadmap and help them to implement. So that primarily sums up the role. So I'm moving more from an operating responsibility to more of an advisory influencer, and also making sure that it is correctly implemented.
It's also very multidimensional from what I can understand.
It is. It certainly is. And it takes... so I have to bring all my influencing and engaging skills, which I've acquired over the years. And that's the... And it's very important to be abreast of all the technology developments, because each of the organizations is very different. They are a diversified set of industries. So you have to know what would probably work for a pharmaceutical industry will not work for an healthcare. The projects there, the technology landscape there is going to be very different. And my stints in manufacturing and financial services has actually helped me to gain that diversified set of knowledge.
Okay, great. I think that's really a fascinating state to be in after so many years of your experience as a technology leader, to be able to influence a larger set of organizations and create a bigger impact for a lot more people. That's amazing. And if we have to really look at a macro level kind of a conversation here, you've been a passionate advocate of digital transformation, and that remains a pressing strategic imperative for all kinds of enterprises today. But interestingly, about 69% of digital transformation projects fail, according to a study by McKinsey Consulting Company. Now, that's a 2021 study, but I assume that the number is somewhere in that range even after 2 years. So in your experience, how do you think organizations should be relooking at digital investments, priorities, and outcomes, given the current economic uncertainties and a lot of other factors, now that you've been working with a larger set of companies also effectively?
But I'm not surprised at the number that you said, about 70% of organizations which embark on a digital transformation fail. That's because they are not able to recognize what it actually takes to digitally transform. Most organizations treat digital transformation and it has one word. They take it in one breath. In reality, digital and transformation are two different things. And 70% of the organizations, which are mentioned in the McKinsey report has failed, do fail in the transformation. It's very easy to get a digital landscape in place. That's the technology part. So you can get apps, customer facing apps. You can put up, let's say, an integration layer. You could put up a data warehouse. You could have robotics doing your process automation. But most organizations don't realize that's the easiest part. It's very easy to deploy technologies today. The difficult part is actually doing a transformation. And most organizations, what they do is when they embark on a digital transformation, they merely automate whatever they are doing currently. And therein lies the problem. They carry forward the current inefficiencies. Very few organizations actually question the status quo. Because an organization which has truly successfully digitally transformed goes back to the basics. They challenge existing processes, and that's a very difficult thing to do because they are used to certain ways of working, and that's not very easy. So I'll give an example. In my previous organizations, we had deployed robotics to automate our retail operations. The whole project was about 9 months, and we had a productivity gain of about 25%. Okay. But the first 6 months of that 9 months, the efforts had nothing to do with technology. Okay. So we had engaged with one of the big four to have a look at our processes. We had detailed discussions with the ops head, with the people, question every segment of a process, whether it is required in the first. Forget about the technology, forget about automation. If a robo is doing your current process, is this particular check required? Mm-hmm. So we question every segment of a process. Let's say if a particular process had some 15 sub processes, we could eliminate nearly 50% of them. Mm-hmm. Okay. And when we designed, redesigned, reimagined the processes, we took a sign off from the ops head, saying that yes, if this is handled by a robotic process, he will be able to release or improve his productivity by some X percentage. It's only after that we deployed the technology. So and then when we deployed technology, we actually deployed it in the most effective way.
Right. Yeah.
So I think the biggest challenge to organization is to think of the transformation. So I would say you transform digitally rather than digital transformation. Think of what you want to transform. Even if, let's say, a customer facing journeys, put yourselves in the customer's shoes. Reimagine the customer journeys. Write down user stories. Think of what's going to be the outcome. The outcome of your digital transformation should be well embedded into everyone who is involved in the whole process.
Yeah.
And that outcome should be very attractive.
Ironically, I think most organizations, as you said, start with technology and ends nowhere, maybe, perhaps.
Yes, technology should always come at the end. You should always start with transformation. What is it that you want to transform? And that's what I do for my current portfolio companies, based on my experience in Tata Capital or even in ICICI Bank, where, and most of the banks are very mature in their digital processes. So first, when we say, okay, we want to digitize, tell me what you are going to achieve after digitization. Right. What's the outcome that you're going to achieve? And that has to have an impact on either your bottom line or your top line.
Absolutely. So technology is just one of the components, as you said. The
transformation and with so much of applications or systems or platforms developed on the cloud, it's very easy to implement any technology that you would want.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're spoiled for choices when it comes to technology, right?
You're right. And I think it's very important to first, what do you want to do with the technology? Have a very strong, robust use case.
Great. So you gave me a big picture about, digital transformation. I want to kind of move on to something a little more specific. We know that digital transformation is different for different companies. It's different for different verticals. Could you give me a reality check on the digital transformation in the financial services sector? Because I think that's one sector that adopted digital transformation at a very early stage, and they're probably at a very advanced stage of adoption when it comes to digital technologies. And to somebody like me, it looks like, they've reached some sort of a saturation point of digital adoption. Where do you think the next phase of growth is going to come from for the financial services industry? What will the next phase of DX will look like for this industry?
You're absolutely correct, Radhika. In terms of from a digital adoption, the financial services were way ahead of the other industries. And actually, from my experience, adoption of a digital framework has helped banks and financial services to drive down their cost. Because the cost of acquiring a customer digitally is significantly lesser than on an offline basis. And I think the whole maturity of doing a digital transformation, drawing out the process, drawing out the journeys, putting the process in place before the technology is quite mature in financial services. And I would say and that has resulted actually in far fewer branch walk-ins. Because every service which a customer wants is available digitally, whether it's statement of account or certificates or even changing a debit card PIN, everything can be done digitally. And I think there is about 80 to 90% of the services are done digitally, irrespective of the financial institution, whether it is banks or NBFCs. Right. So you're right in one way in thinking that yes, they are reaching a saturation level, and what's next? I think the era now, and that's not just true for a financial services, it's for any B2C industry, whether it is consumer tech or let's say an e-commerce or whatever service or hospitality. It's the era of hyper-personalization. And when we talk of millions of customers which a bank would have, how would a customer feel that I'm being serviced exclusively by the bank? What does the bank know about me? And a digital strategy, that's why a digital strategy is very closely linked to a data strategy. You cannot have a very digital transformation in place unless it is backed by a very robust data framework. And I think and the next phase is, how do you hyper-personalize a customer experience? How does a customer feel that, the customer, the bank or the financial institution is catering exclusively to his needs? How does he get that comfort? And I think that's the next challenge, and that would happen if the organization is able to have a very robust 360-degree view about the end customer. And when I say 360-degree view, not only about his engagement with the bank, but also about his digital footprint other than the bank or the financial or the NBFC.
Great. That's fascinating. In fact, exciting times ahead for the banking industry, no doubt. You also touched upon data, which is at the heart of any transformation program, as we know. And one of the other gaps that we keep talking about is, despite having petabytes of data and the tools to kind of bring value out of that data, of organizations are struggling to be really truly data-driven entities. In fact, I think a recent Gartner survey revealed that less than half of data and analytics teams effectively provide value to organizations, which is quite surprising, right? As organizations embark on big projects on AI and analytics, etc., how do you think they can address some of these data missteps and move forward?
I think the answer lies to some of the conversations we had some time back on the transformation piece. It's very easy to actually take data, put it into a data lake or a data repository. The question is, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
And most organizations do not have answers to that. They have been, many of the decision makers have been taking decisions based on a process or a practice which has been going on for so many years. They are used to a particular process of taking decisions. They are used to seeing a particular dashboard, and many of them are prepared manually. Many of them are prepared in Excel worksheets and dashboards, which are culled out from various systems. And there's an army of people who will prepare dashboards for the decision makers. And when you embark on a data strategy, everyone ignores that. The thrust is on creating massive data lakes and data warehouses, and creating very attractive looking dashboards, which is of no use for the decision makers. That's because it doesn't make sense to them. So the first step in a data strategy is actually an information strategy.
Okay.
And the misstep happens because organizations miss out on that.
Okay.
So when I say an information strategy, is you engage with starting right from the top. What are the decisions, let's say, a CEO takes? What are the decisions a CFO takes? What are the decisions a COO takes? What are the decisions a branch head takes? Question that. Come to a conclusion that these are the performance metrics which he should actually take. And probably, he may be currently looking at information which he's not supposed to look at or not necessary to look at. So first come to a conclusion that this is the information map or the decision map of an organization. Get it aligned with everyone in the organization. Do a review of all the performance metrics.
Okay.
And that's not very easy, because you got to again question the decisions that he's taking. You again got to question the sources of data that he is relying on. And once that has happened, then you start your data strategy. Now, I tell you, the one is, of course, once you draw the information architecture, but your challenge doesn't end there. Okay. The problem is, when you aggregate data from various sources, the quality of data is always a question mark. Yeah. So even though you may have aligned performance metrics across the length and breadth of the organizations, got it signed off, ultimately when you draw the dashboards, okay, it may not match with the reality, because the quality of data in the underneath transaction systems are questionable.
Yeah.
So this is a second step which most organizations miss out, and this takes time. For example, I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say a mobile number, for example. Okay. In many of the organizations or many of the fields, it may be left as not mandatory. Okay. Or even if it's mandatory, people would enter it as all 10 ones or single digits. So how do you make sure? So that there should be a separate exercise to make sure that the quality of data which are there in the source systems are of a required standard.
Okay. Yeah.
So once you do that, and then you spend time on use cases. So if you're assured of the quality of data, if you're aligned that these are the performance metrics, rest of the steps then become very easy.
Interesting.
And most organizations fail because they miss out on drawing up the information architecture. They miss out on making sure that the quality of data is, reliable. And that's why you spend a lot of time in putting up data lakes or data warehouses or dashboards, and it's of no use.
Yeah, because you don't have the right kind of data which can be used.
Yes, that's true.
This whole process sounds very overwhelming for a layman like me, but you've been a data champion, and it's great that you're working with a set of organizations now to kind of help them, guide them in the.
That's what I in my previous organizations, that's exactly what I did. So we engaged with one of the big four for about 6 months to first define what are the performance metrics, got it aligned. Parallelly, we set out a separate team to clean the data in the underlying systems.
Okay.
And then, focused on building the data lakes or, the data warehouses. Mm-hmm. And when we made it live, the adoption was much more smoother and went on expected lines.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now we spoke about a number of aspects, and now to come to my last question, which is basically about the CIO role. You've had a front row seat to the kind of evolution that the CIO role has been undergoing in the last few years, and CIOs are clearly becoming co-creators of new business models as technology drives every aspect of a business today. Does this mean that the historical divide between IT and business is shrinking? If so, what are the areas where businesses and IT need tighter collaboration in today's context?
Frankly, if you ask me, Radhika, and I feel, and I may be quite extreme in my views, the role of a CIO would disappear in the coming years.
Wow.
Okay. The chief technology officer or a chief information officer would not be in its current form. Now, I'll tell you, let's take a decade back. I'm not very far off actually. In a typical IT department of a bank or let's say any organizations, you had an array of servers, huge servers, you had data centers. So you had a large infrastructure team. You had a large application development team. So you had an army of people, and it was very complex. You had to maintain everything yourself. And that's what made the role very complex. And that's what also lent that complex credibility to the CTO or the CIO. But these days, everything is available on the cloud. I think it's the business leaders are not agnostic to technology as they were even 5 years back.
Absolutely, yes.
So I think that from a chief technology role, a chief technology officer, what would be more relevant is a chief transformation officer. Mm-hmm. It's very important to understand technologies that are available today, but what's more important is to get a firm handle on how it's going to be deployed within the organization.
Right.
The use cases are more important than the technology themselves. So, I'll give you a very simple example. To deploy a data lake, even as recent as, let's say, 4 years back, I had to have a strong team of about 20, 25 people. Mm-hmm. But today, many of the cloud platforms have a data lake on the fly. If you have your sources of data, if you have everything, you could put up a data lake in less than 60 days.
Right.
So you don't require an army of people, but the challenge is use cases. How do you make use of it? And that's where I feel that the role of a CIO, CTO, or a business is going to diffuse into something of a transformation officer, and the potential there is going to be massive.
Right. In fact, I think the CIO would stop being the custodian of technology. He'll have to probably let go and play a larger role within the organization.
Absolutely, a transforming role. So I would rather than call a CTO as a chief transformation officer.
Right. I think that's going to be a big opportunity for a CIO to
really.
He's going to be the true influencer within and outside the organization.
Yeah.
And influence communities and customers, and it has a lot of impact.
Right.
Great. I think thank you so much for joining me today, Mr. Mani.
Thank you, Radhika.
A really great conversation and really enjoyed listening to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.